Hello, my name is Ian Watson, and my criminal investigation presentation is about how the FBI used the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act in 1980s New York to investigate and indict the 5 bosses of the American Mafia criminal organization. I first want to talk about the Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act of 1970, otherwise known as RICO. Here on the slide you have the law as it is found in the books. It is lengthy and complicated and has a lot of interesting words in there like racketeering activity, unlawful debts, and enterprises. But it's tough to understand what any of that means if you don't break it down. So then, first things first, what is racketeering activity? What is a racket? Well, a racket is an illegal scheme or plan. It's usually to make money or to save money, and it usually involves some measure of fraud and some measure of injury or extortion to victims in order to make that money or in order to have that plan work. And so racketeering activity is organized engagement in the illegal scheme or plan. You can have a crime without it being a racket. It only becomes a racket when there's organized engagement in it, when it's happening according to a plan, and generally when it's making money. The next couple of slides include the definition of racketeering activity as given by RICO, it's given by the law. The law has to be very specific about what is legal activity and what is not legal, and so you see a very lengthy list of things here that are considered to be racketeering activity, but the law needs to be expansive because smart and creative criminals can engineer all sorts of illegal schemes to commit extortion or otherwise illegal activities and make money from them. And so this list does a good job, as any law can, of capturing everything that can be thought of. Thankfully, the other relevant definitions are not as lengthy or as complicated as the first one. State means any of the states and territories of the United States, any place the United States has authority over. Person is written to be pretty all-inclusive, not just one human being, but any single entity that can legally hold property. So that includes corporations. Enterprise here can be used in a similar way to how I've been using the word organization. You have a plan of action, and at least one person is following that plan, which speaks to the enterprise, including any individual, as well as partnerships, corporations, associations. The entity can be a legal one with like a name and an official standing, or it can just be a loose association that doesn't really have anything official going on about it. It can be any of those things, any kind of association. The pattern of racketeering activity means more than one instance of racketeering activity as defined earlier. There have to be at least 2 separate counts in order to create a pattern, and those acts need to have occurred within 10 years of each other. And then unlawful debt basically means a debt that occurred as a part of an unlawful agreement. If the agreement creating the creditor-debtor relationship is not legal, then the creditor cannot legally collect on what is owed. Looking at the other relevant definitions hopefully makes the prohibited activities under RICO a bit more clear. Basically, RICO makes it illegal to start or gain control over any organization involved with interstate or foreign commerce with money obtained from racketeering activity. It makes it illegal to run any organization involved with interstate or foreign commerce with racketeering activity or with money gained from that activity. It makes it illegal to use an organization involved in interstate or foreign commerce to engage in racketeering activity, and it makes it a crime to conspire with anyone else to commit any of those other 3 things. So what did RICO change? What did RICO do that was so different from what was there before? Well, under RICO, a person can now be convicted because they ordered someone to commit racketeering activity. So now you can prosecute the whole group of people associated with the crime, from the big boss all the way down to the associates. You can go after the whole organization at one time. RICO also made it easier to prove racketeering activity by allowing investigators to use indirect circumstantial evidence, or evidence that doesn't precisely provide proof of a fact, but instead demonstrates the likelihood of a fact. We talked about this in class, instead of being limited to direct evidence. And then RICO also allowed the justice system to put racketeers away for a much longer period of time, not more than 20 years for each violation of RICO, if the crime they committed while racketeering prescribes less than that punishment, or for more than 20 years if the crime they committed prescribed for more. So for example, if someone committed first-degree murder as a part of racketeering activity, they could receive up to a life imprisonment because that's the sentence for first-degree murder. We're not going to limit it to 20 years just because you happen to commit murder as a part of a racket. No, you still go to prison for life. I now want to switch from looking at RICO itself to looking at the organization that practically inspired RICO, the American Mafia, or also known as La Cosa Nostra. So what is the American Mafia? As I have written here, it is a United States-based criminal organization with Italian roots, and its members conspire with each other to become wealthy by breaking the law in the most profitable ways possible. It engages in racketeering activity and unlawful debt collection. Many people think there is only one Italian organized crime family called the Mafia, but there have historically been 5 different Italian groups active in the United States: the Sicilian Mafia, the Neapolitan Camorra, the Calabrian Mafia, the Sacra Corona Unita, and the American Mafia. When people think of the Italian Mafia crime family based in New York and featured in movies like The Godfather, The Goodfellas, and The Irishman, they are thinking of the American Mafia. Both the American and Sicilian Mafias are called La Cosa Nostra. The American Mafia inherited that name from the Sicilian Mafia, and in fact is descended from the Sicilian Mafia, coming to the United States with Sicilian immigrants in the mid-1800s. The American Mafia is a national organization with members in practically every state, although the most notable mafia activities in the 1800s occurred in New Orleans after a series of powerful Sicilian mafiosos emigrated there. The Mafia also had a presence at that time in New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, and St. Louis. By the 1970s and 1980s, the period we're talking about in this presentation, New York City had become the seat of Mafia authority for the entire country. The 5-family structure came about in 1931 after the resolution of what is known as the Castellamarese War, a 3-year conflict for complete control between the Sicilian-dominated faction led by Salvatore Maranzano and the American-dominated faction led by Joe Masseria. Maranzano emigrated to the United States from Italy and spoke with the voice of the Sicilian Mafia, while Masseria had been born in the United States and did not want to be under Sicilian control. Maranzano got Masseria killed and then became the strongest mafia boss in the United States. He declared himself the boss of bosses, officialized the 5 governing criminal family structure, and established the code of conduct, including the code of silence, or the omertà. That was the backbone of the mafia's code of conduct and played a huge role in keeping U.S. authorities from eliminating the criminal organization. Of course, Salvatore did not last long as the boss of bosses because his successor killed him, Charles Lucky Luciano. Upon Salvatore's death, the idea of a boss of bosses gave way to the bosses of the 5 families working together as a board of directors to share authority over the entire organization. That group of bosses became known as the Commission and continued to be known as such into and beyond the 1980s. A big part of the reason why the Mafia was so successful was because of its organizational structure. Each family had a similar structure. The boss was at the top and had an advisor called the consigliere. Each boss had an underboss or second in command. Reporting to the underboss were the captains called capos, and each captain ran a group of soldiers. Then the soldiers would often run their own groups of associates. Anyone who was a soldier or above was a made man, or someone fully initiated into the Mafia, a full member. To become a made man, a person needed to be of Italian descent and needed to be sponsored by another made man. Induction into full membership included an initiation ceremony where the inductee swore to uphold the omertà, and participated in a ritual where the inductee shed blood, promised to value his mafia relations over even his blood family, and became reborn into the mafia. This structure helped insulate the people controlling the organization and ordering the illegal activities, such as the boss, the underbosses, and the captains, from the people actually doing the illegal acts on the streets, the soldiers and the associates. Arresting the soldiers and their associates did not appreciably affect the organization, and their convictions only kept them in prison for a brief period before engaging in mafia activity again upon their release. This is only a brief, non-exhaustive list of illegal activities that the mafia got into. Bank robberies, drug running, arson, murder, extortion, tax evasion, you name it, they did it. Anything that was illegal, basically, was what they were into. Having gone over RICO and the American Mafia, let's talk about putting them together, the RICO investigation of the American Mafia. First thing I found interesting was that although RICO became federal law in 1970, the FBI didn't really start using it until 1980. A lot of it is because they didn't understand how to use it, and it's kind of a complicated law. It took me a long time to figure it out. I'm pretty sure that I have figured it out. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure the professor will correct me if I'm wrong on some things. But when they started using it in 1980, they changed their investigation strategy to satisfy the elements of a RICO violation. So they started trying to prove the existence of the crime family criminal organization, and then they tried to tie the connections between the bosses and the racketeering and unlawful collecting activities of the soldiers and associates to this organization. If they can prove that all of them were acting in accordance with an organization, they can get the bosses as well as the underlings. Now that they're looking for organizations and to tie these criminals to organizations, they started trying to prove the existence of the five-family structure. So they decided to open 5 separate RICO investigations, one for each of the 5 families. And the primary weapons and the FBI's arsenal were informants that would actually talk to them, not too many because the mafia kills informants, and listening devices, covert listening devices, or bugs. Now, as we learned in Chapter 4, unreasonable searches are unconstitutional, and planting bugs in people's homes, cars, and businesses without a warrant is definitely unreasonable. So the FBI had to present probable cause to a judge in order to get a warrant for planting each individual bug. The FBI started from the bottom of the organization and worked upward. So 3 or so corroborating accounts from reliable informants about the criminal activity of the lower ranking members of the mafia was enough to get probable cause to bug those lower members. The FBI bugged them and used what they learned from those bugs to establish probable cause for bugging higher ranking members. So for instance, the FBI developed probable cause from informants to put a bug in the home of Anthony Ruggiero, who was a member of the Gambino family, and used the information they got from him to put a bug in Paul Castellano's home. Paul Castellano was the boss. They connected Ruggiero to the boss and got probable cause to put bugs in the boss's home, where they otherwise wouldn't have had it. The FBI's bugging campaign of the mafia was vast. They were able to put a significant number of bugs in the mafiosos' homes, in their cars, offices, leisure areas, restaurants, everywhere. And all of that happened before the mafia even realized that they were bugged. There was a lot of information discovered, including everything on the list on the slide here, but the most important thing they discovered was the existence of the commission. Having discovered that, they were able to open up a 6th RICO case that alleged the commission was the organization that was running all of the criminal activity. And that is what really ended up getting the bosses in prison. Finally, after about 5 years of getting probable cause to get warrants, 5 years of listening to bugs and listening to conversations and staking out and taking pictures and following vehicles, the FBI finally got enough evidence to indict all 5 bosses and several of their subordinates on February 25th, 1985. They were indicted for racketeering activity and unlawful debt collection that, although they did not do any of those things personally, they were recorded and the FBI had evidence of them giving the order to do those things or talking about the the order to do those things. And so they were arrested and charged just as if they had done those acts themselves.